Welcome to Breaking Chains, Navigating Substance Use Recovery in and Out of the Criminal Justice System, a panel moderated by Noel Vest. Noel Vest is an assistant professor at Boston University School of Public Health. As a formerly incarcerated scholar, Dr. Vest is an advocate for social justice issues and public policy concerning substance use disorder recovery and prison reentry. His research interests include mental health, substance use disorders, poverty, social justice, addiction recovery, and pain. He was recently awarded a K1 Early Investigator Award from NIDA to study collegiate recovery programs through an implementation science lens. He received his PhD and master's degrees in experimental psychology from Washington State University. He recently finished a postdoc in the Department of Pain Medicine at Stanford University. And I will let Dr. Vest and the panelists introduce themselves. Turn it over.
All right. Ooh, that one's good, isn't it? It's nice. Well, it's wonderful to see everybody today. Many of the faces that I see, I remember from last year. I was invited last year to come and give a keynote, so I'll be very, very brief with kind of my introduction and what brings me to this work. I do want to say that I'm really just honored to be invited back to do this panel. I think that it's just wonderful, the work that's happening here, and it just warms my heart to see people talking about reentry and services for reentry and centering the voice of people that are formerly incarcerated in all of those conversations. And so it's really, really wonderful to be here. So very briefly, what brings me to this work is, like many people that are interested in this work, I too struggled with addiction through really my entire 20s. And that led to that downward spiral of addiction and led to quite a few negative consequences, the majority being a 7-year prison sentence in the Nevada Department of Corrections. A couple of things happened while I was there. I was involved in a college and prison program through the Community College of Southern Nevada that just opened my eyes to education that had never really been opened before. And then I was also introduced to mutual aid meetings. So they had AA and NA meetings that were in there that really just came at a perfect time in my life when my mind was kind of interested in trying to get better, basically. And so I got out of prison in 2009 and had my dad drop me off at the local community college. And from there, I really just kind of took off. I went with the goal of really wanting to become a drug and alcohol counselor. I learned very, very quickly that I did not want to be a drug and alcohol counselor. Which was great because I was already kind of in school, and so I had a mentor take me under her wing, got me involved in her research lab, and really the rest is history. I went on to finish graduate school at Washington State University, recently finished a postdoc working with Dr. Keith Humphreys and Sean Mackey at Stanford, and now am an assistant professor at the Boston University School of Public Health. But I really do kind of point back to that college and prison program. It really just kind of changed my life when I really kind of needed it most. And so when we think about reentry, when we think about programming, it really, it obviously starts before reentry, and really kind of making sure that we're thinking about not just people that are trying to reenter, but the programs that we're thinking about before people are reentering. And so with that, we'll go ahead and jump right in. We've got some really, really great people on the panel. And so really I just want to take a few minutes and just kind of hear briefly from everyone. If everyone can just take a few moments, talk about what brings you to this work, and then share anything you're comfortable sharing about your personal journey to this point and to the career that you have right now. So we'll start on this end with Daryl.
If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. I did a lot of Zooms, right? So I like emojis, thumbs up, I like all that stuff. Let's get comfortable. So how you doing? My name is Daryl McGraw. I am from Connecticut. And I thought coming to Texas, it was going to be warm, and it is cold. Glad I brought my leather. I have, man, I get the, it's an honor and a privilege. And after hearing the brother Sam speak, it just put me in such a great space for people that would lived experience. So first I have to say it's an honor and a privilege to be on this panel, but also an honor and privilege to be in this space, because for a long time, people didn't talk about us. And, you know, the one thing that before I get into my introduction, I would encourage you that any of you that work with people that are coming home from prison, just got home, and they tell you that, hey, I just got out or whatever, I just need you to do me one favor and say, welcome home. Welcome home. I need you to do that, because as you heard the brother share over there, and I will be talking today, you know, getting out of prison probably was one of the most hardest things I've ever had to do. I was released from prison June 10, 2010. Appreciate that. Thank you. I was incarcerated May 7, 2007, and that's the last time that I put a substance in my body. That's the last time I've been in the back of a police car. And I'd say that's the last time I've been in prison, but they let me in and out all the time now. So if y'all don't see me next year, look for your boy. You know, I've been very grateful on this journey of recovery to be able to be in spaces like this and share what it means to be a formerly incarcerated person, because that's what I am first and foremost, a formerly incarcerated person, which, like I said, I spent 10 years of my life cycling in and out of the correctional system. And when I was released June 10, 2010, there were no reentry. There was no reentry process. By the grace of God, I was very fortunate to have written a 5-year plan for myself that I call today my journey for reentry. And it was really, for me, that was impactful, because when I got out, there weren't people like you looking to receive me and be there for me. And one of the things that stands out the most, and you know, you never know, I always think like, I got this great stuff that I'm gonna say, but then God tells me to say something different. One of the things that I'll pass on to my other colleagues is that this reentry work, this recovery work, it's the three-legged stool, right? And it's CSI. And I know many of you are thinking crime scenes investigators, but no, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about communities, systems, and individuals. Without all three working together, the person or the system will not work. I'm not gonna say fail, because they like to say fail when we end up back in prison, but it's really the system or the community failed us. And I'll say that the community has its role, the community has its role to receive the person that's coming home, has to have the services, has to have people like you ready to receive us. The system has to prepare people to be received, making sure that they have everything, not just a certificate, but prepare us to be able to go back out there and be successful in the community. And the person has to be ready and willing to receive those services and know where they're at, and so on and so forth. So we can talk more about that three-legged stool. In closing, I'll say, and I like to say in closing a lot, because then that makes you think I'm getting to the end. In 2018, I started an organization called Formerly Inc., which is Connecticut's first criminal justice consulting organization that's I have to say predominantly, because my assistant is not formerly incarcerated, but everyone else is formerly incarcerated. And what we do is consulting and mentoring, and we do a ton of different stuff, and we'll get into that as we go down the line. But thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, hello. Thank you all for inviting me here. It truly is an honor to be in this space with everyone and hear about their journeys. My personal journey. The last time, I am a person in long-term recovery, by the way. The last time I put anything into my body to change the way that I feel was June 12th of 2012 at 1:20 p.m. And I know that time because that was when I chose to walk away. I finally decided to choose myself. After that, I was looking at 4 years in prison. previous to that date, I had cycled in and out of the jail system for 3 years. And it kept getting darker and darker every single time. When I was looking at that 4 years in prison, I knew that I wasn't gonna make it, and I had to make a choice. And like I said, I did choose myself. But I did it alone. I did it alone for a very long time. I am from a rural community, and we have 12-step and 12-step. And because of my background, and I'm not, saying anything negative about 12-step at all. I mean, it works for so many people, but at the time it was not working for me. There was not a space that was welcoming to me and how I was choosing to do my recovery. So fortunately for me, several years into my recovery and navigating that alone, I was blessed with certain people that kept being put into my pathway. And I heard about this place called Unity Recovery. They were having a town hall in my hometown, and it was virtually unheard of. I mean, what is peer support? What is recovery support services? I had never heard anything like that before, so I was intrigued. And I invited my boss to join me. And so we went to this town hall, and I heard about all the incredible things that Unity Recovery was proposing to bring to our little bitty town. And I put my 2 weeks notice in right then. I knew that peer support was something that I wanted to be a part of, and I haven't looked back since. Thank you.
My name is Jayme Whitaker. I'm the Vice President of Forensic Services at Mental Health America of Indiana, and MHAI is a statewide advocacy organization for substance use and mental health. I've been in recovery about 25 years. Thank you. The first time I spent most of my teenage years locked up and went to prison at the age of 15. They had a youth dorm. And then back to prison again in my early 20s. And for the last 15 years, I've been working as an advocate around system change, both for youth and adults. I grew up in the foster care system, so between foster care and substance use and mental health challenges, and I am a person in long-term recovery with mental illness. I think that it's always been a journey for me of just trying to do system work and system level work and engage with state leadership and different organizations to try and create change for people who are struggling with life and with things and with history and trauma and all the things we deal with. I'm very lucky to live in Indiana. I'm from Indiana. We have great leadership, and the last few years we've been able to really make a lot of headway. So for the last 5 years, I work primarily in the jails and prison system in Indiana, and we are integrating peers into that space, into all the jails, and integrating peers into the courts and with probation, and really trying to look at how we create new interventions and create opportunities to divert people away from the criminal justice system. So I've been very blessed to lead up that work in Indiana, and we're currently continuing to expand every year, which is really great. And this year we just started training peers to work inside the prisons, which we're super excited about. So that's kind of what brought me to the work I am today and why I'm here.
Well, hopefully this works. Yeah, can we get another round of applause? Is this incredible or what? That's really, really incredible. And so we'll start on this end. And so the first question is around, from your perspective, can you speak about some of the, well, at least one of the initiatives or interventions or resources that are working for individuals coming out of the prison system?
Absolutely. I think that when you look at reentry, and whether I think we could talk about this in a bigger sense, whether you're leaving a youth detention center, or whether you're leaving a jail, or whether you're leaving a prison, when you look at the idea that you've been incarcerated, there's reasons why you've been incarcerated. It could be a host of reasons. And what can we do in that space to systemically create opportunities for success, right? And I don't want to define success by you followed the rules or you dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's, because that's really not how we define success. And so one of the things I think that at least in Indiana we're doing that we felt like was really impactful was the process of reentry has to shift from focusing on leaving incarceration, and it has to focus on starting at the day you arrive at incarceration. So we call it reentry begins at day one, right? So the intervention space needs to be at the point of incarceration, not at the point of release. So I think one of the biggest mindset shifts that I think can be impactful in that area of reentry is the idea that we need to intervene and we need to connect with individuals, not with charges, not with your history. I mean, I love what earlier he said, I'm not my charge, I'm not what I've done, right? That's absolutely on point. We have to realize that at that earliest stage of incarceration, that we have a person who has a history and a story that got them to this point today. We have to intervene in that space there first. And it can't be something, the second thing I think that's really impactful and really important is it needs to be people that it has to be an approachable approach, right? So it has to be a disarming approach. What we found to be impactful in that space is to have people with lived experience, people with a history that are relatable in that space. So not an outsider coming into the incarceration, but let's put that work inside the space. So instead of being someone who comes to the jail to work people, let's make it someone who works inside the jail. So a person of lived experience who operates inside the jail, not as a corrections officer, not as a court person, but as a person of lived experience. So we get a space a safe space to operate as someone. The only reason I'm in this jail is because I'm a person with lived experience. So that's my relevance, not my clinical history, not anything else, but put them in that space. So then that's the approach becomes disarming and allows people to, I think, approach that. And I think the third thing I think that is impactful for us is then you have to prepare for release at that moment. So you need to look at all the different recovery capital or whatever you want to call it, all the different needs across the board, and there has to be a process that's going to gear someone for success before they ever hit the door. Between insurance, food, housing, clothing, transportation, employment, all those things have to be addressed while the individual's incarcerated, and look at how when they leave the jail, we remove all the barriers we can so that we reduce as much risk as humanly possible. We increase those protective factors. And then at the end of the day, they're leaving with someone who has been there, who knows that journey and can go with them. Those are the things I think that from our end, I have found to be absolutely just essential. If you want anyone to succeed, it has to start there.
Yeah, so let's see. Resources and interventions for individuals coming out of the prison system. You said it perfectly. Start at the very beginning. Have peers go in and hold space for those individuals. And specifically where I'm from, in my experience being in that jail system and then being a peer going in, there are no programs for women. That was my experience. Some of these women, they don't have families. They're separated from their children. They are feeling lost and alone, and just being able to hold that space for them and providing that emotional support that they need right there in that moment in time is huge for them. And start helping them figure out some of the barriers that they can work on while they are there, so they're not having to worry about that when they're leaving. They have things set up, lined up. They know that a peer is going to be meeting them when they walk out the door and guiding them, walking with them through their journey.
Hello, everybody. So, I mean, when you're on a panel and your colleagues we all speak the same language and it's the same thing, right? We all believe in the same thing. Reentry begins, I mean, you guys should be clapping it up to hear that reentry begins at the beginning of the sentence and not the end. You cannot fix someone's life at 60 days, 90 days. That doesn't work when my life has been a mess all for 20, 30 years, right? And all of a sudden you're like, hey, we're doing reentry today. 60, you know, it's time for your reentry certificate. It doesn't work like that. So if we're changing the system, we need to be changing the system right off the bat and talking talking about reentry. If I came in homeless, come on, the math is simple. I'm probably going to be homeless when it's time for me to leave. So we need to be addressing those issues and asking the right questions about how an individual ends up in the system. Why do you keep cycling in and out? People are like, oh, guess what happened? I know what happened. You got locked up. I know what happened. So addressing those things, and Shanna said about the women. I mean, we can't focus enough about the women. That should have been a standing ovation for you, my friend, because women in reentry reenter differently than men. So those systems are different. We can't have one cookie cutter system for one. Like everybody, that's not the process. Women have a different track than men. So we should be having women. I've been advocating for women's programs all over the country because we don't have them just specifically for women in reentry, or they're always co-ed, and so we all know what comes in with that. So just focusing on that. One of the things that's worked for us, we do forensic peer support training, and that means we're taking individuals with lived experience and properly training them. You can't just make somebody, because I have lived experience, right? All of a sudden, you're going to put me in this role and I'm supposed to help someone transition. We need to train people properly first to engage that individual so we can receive them. And that also means being culturally competent, right? I'm from the hood. So I need somebody to help me transition back to the hood. Nothing against my friends from rural areas, because we notice that, our problems are the same, right? Lack of resources and different things like that. But you're going to prepare me to go home. I need to be able to, I need to have that person that's going to work with me understand where I'm going back to, because those challenges are quite different.
Absolutely.
Y'all can clap too, man.
Yeah.
Y'all right?
Absolutely.
Y'all good? We good here? The lights have me feeling like I'm in the police station. I'm ready to confess.
Yeah, I remember one of my earliest issues when I had become a drug and alcohol counselor is that we used to get a lot of people that would come through the treatment center that were, a drug court or some kind of diversion. And it seemed to me that really what they did is they just kind of put those people, the intervention was really putting those people to the head of the line for any kind of social services, housing, and things like that. And he just always just blew me away that, why can't we do that for everyone? Why would we, why do we need to have these programs? We're just putting, we're given kind of this head start. And so I agree completely that it really does start with a lot of these different programs that are so important for people coming out of prison. Okay, so next question, we'll start with you this time, Shanna. How can we work to integrate peers more into prison reentry spaces, and what would you say are the biggest barriers to that?
One of the things that I think is really important for this question, I'm kind of excited to answer this question, is to start having open dialogue with people that are working in these spaces, in these institutions. Invite them into your space, into your recovery centers. Have them come out with you. Show them what we do, the services that we provide, and how they can be beneficial for the people in the system. I lost my train of thought. One of the biggest barriers that I experienced going into the jail system was the lack of training on their end. That was pretty huge for me, not knowing the protocols or the policies or the rules, and kind of sidelined me pretty quickly. But to answer that question fully, I really think having open dialogue with the people in the system is the most important step to getting the ball rolling and getting more peers into the jail and prison system.
I think there's, looking at it systemically, I think it's, and I know every state's at a different place, so I think that there has to be, first and foremost, seeing the role of peers as professionals. That's the first step you got to take, and I think if you can create the space where you have peer support professionals. And you're not asking them to be clinicians, you're not asking them to be another role or fill in a space or tag along, but this is a standalone field of professionals that's there, and what makes them valid in that place is not a degree, but it ultimately ends up their lived experience. And then you professionalize it by creating a kind of a statewide or system-wide approach of training and certifying those peers. I think that was for us was a step first, was helping sheriffs and wardens and other people realize that this is a professional group coming in the door. And that's a cultural mindset shift that you have to have lots of meetings and trainings around to shift that mindset. There has to be some trust built. And then I think the second part of that is creating a work for those professionals that's strictly their work. It's not saying, hey, let's see where we can lump you in with the clinical providers. Nothing wrong with clinical whatsoever. Peers are in the treatment spectrum, just like clinicians and everyone else. But ultimately, I believe peer work needs to stay peer work. So you have to create that space for that. I think that was successful for us. Then you build a relationship with your law enforcement and your wardens, because that's a biggie, because it's another world where that's not necessarily a natural alignment. I bring people when we speak in our state. One of my favorite people to talk about is one of our counties in the south part of the state. There is a sheriff at the jail and then there's our peer leader and our peer supervisor for the jail program there. The sheriff used to be the drug force task force detective who arrested the peer leader, and it was the one that sent him to prison, and now he's the sheriff of that county, and then that peer leader now runs all over the jail, and they work within the jail, and their partnership has been a mindset shift I believe for law enforcement. I'm a child of a law enforcement officer, so going to prison at 15, all the stuff I did, I got deep into outlaw culture, deep into organized crime. So to come from that background and then to go back into working with law enforcement and helping them understand, because law enforcement officers are pretty straightforward. Same thing with corrections. I'm here to keep you safe. I'm here to do the mandates the court has laid out. That's the thinking pattern. Well, they're also holding space to try and, every law enforcement officer I work with says the same thing. I don't want to lock people up. I want to help people. I didn't get in this job to punish folks. I got in this job to help folks. And so how do I do that? Well, creating programs for the prisons and the jails that gives law enforcement an opportunity to be a partner in the treatment, in the helping, in the healing space, and not just seeing them as someone who's there to let us do work, but as a part of the work, I think is essential if you want to have those successful programs in the prisons. And then lastly, for the prison systems, there's a lot of people who are going to be in there for a long time. I was facing 20 years the last time I was facing prison. And so how do we take those individuals who have long-term incarceration, train them as peers, give them an opportunity to change culture inside the prisons and to grow that recovery ecosystem inside the prisons so that they have a work to do. And those are the folks that'll create the change inside culturally, which is the culture shift is what you want. If you go in jails in Indiana now, like we have jails that haven't integrated peer systems yet, and they're still kind of like a jail, and you go into our jails where you integrate peer systems, and you ultimately see a recovery ecosystem inside the jail. It's no longer just a jail, it's a recovery ecosystem. And the cool thing that benefits, it doesn't just benefit the people who are incarcerated, it doesn't just benefit the coaches, it benefits the correctional staff, it benefits the sheriff, it benefits the courts, because now you have people who are seeking recovery and they realize that jail's not just a place you get punished, jail's a place where you can find friends and a help, and I can find they're going to meet needs. And so you don't want to see anyone end up at jail, we want to divert them away if at all possible. But if they do end up there for whatever reason, we want that to be a different space. And so that's what I think is some great first steps in getting to that point.
I love the question, and I love what my colleague said. I think that when we're answering these questions or talking about barriers, the number one barrier that we have, especially as peers, is language. Our language is constantly being hijacked by funders. And, I don't know if in my introduction I said I was a disruptor. Did I tell you I was a disruptor? Because I disrupt systems. That's what I'm here to do. So sometimes I get invited back. Sometimes I don't know, but understanding that, role clarity, right? That was something that Jayme was talking about, role clarity, right? Don't just hire us and tell us, oh, you're the peer, and that checks a box. See, because when I first got the peer job, I was a 5 on the assessment score. It didn't matter what I did, as long as when we got our CARF evaluations or whatever evaluations that the state funders were doing, they had somebody with lived experience there so we could get a score of 5. Right? So I was a 5. That also is my ACEs score too, but that's a whole different story. That's another conversation. But I also wanted to just make the point of, you heard a lot about evidence-based practices. Constantly hearing about evidence-based practices. I am an evidence-based practice. Ask me a question. Ask me how I got here. Because, see, when I identify as a person in recovery, that means that I've been through something. And not only have I been through something, I'm here to tell you about it. Let's be clear, right? So understanding that, and last but not least, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. When I said our language is being hijacked, I really want you to understand what I mean. We have this term called peer. You heard it all day, right? And I don't mean to offend, I'm just here to disrupt. Is that this P-E-E-R is peer. But see, I'm a P-I-R. It's different. Person in recovery. See, when you use P-E-R-E-R, that means that we're all alike and you put us in a basket and we're all cute and this and that, but I'm quite different. I got some student loans that says I have a very large debt to the government for schooling, so I'm not the same as everyone else, but I am a person in recovery, which means I'm an expert on something, transition, and I'm definitely an expert about myself. So ask me the right questions.
Yeah. Yeah, Daryl, piggybacking on what you said, I feel like a lot of times the word peer is stigmatized or even tokenized, I think, sometimes in some of the spaces that we work in. And so this really kind of leads into this next question, that how can we, and when I say we, I mean the clinicians and the administrators and the researchers in this room, how can we work to center the voice of people with lived experience in the legal system in all of the work that we do? And so we'll start down with Daryl this time.
All right. So how we center that voice is making sure that we're not just, quote unquote peers that are making sandwiches and driving vans. We need to be in leadership roles, and we should be at the table in the beginning when programs are being created. Don't call us at the end, call us in the beginning how this works. Because this happens typically, we want to do this really cool program, but no one with lived experience is a part of it. No one's a part of those conversations. No one is a part of the design. You call us at the end, you need to be calling us at the beginning. Our voice is important, and if we're not, so we got this thing, right? If we're not being called, we're building our own tables. Hence, Formerly Inc. and other organizations, we start to build our own tables, and we may invite you to our tables now, because what's happening is we're being excluded from conversations, and the better that we get, and if there's any funders in here, making sure that those grassroots organizations that are all over the country doing the work but don't have the best grant writers start getting some of that money too. Right there. You say it again. Nothing about us without us. That's right. Stop having the conversations without us. I love this conference.
All right. So, piggybacking off what you said, empower us. Empower everyone who has lived experience. Create those leadership opportunities for us to grow and thrive in. I never thought that I would be up here on a panel with these fine gentlemen 12 years ago. It blows my mind, but that's something that Unity Recovery has done for me. It's helped me to grow and thrive with my lived experience and not putting it in the back seat anymore. I think mentorship, too, is so vital for peers. I'm going to use that word. For peers, it's... Mentorship is so important. We need leaders in this field to step up and start introducing new peers to those leadership opportunities. Help us grow.
When I look back on, the last 15 years of being, I got into this work because I wanted to help my people. I wanted to help people, period. I knew that, one, that's a part of my recovery journey, is giving back. I have to reach that place to where I can, when you spend as many years tearing the world apart around you, part of that recovery journey is giving back. And I think in the idea of recovery and the idea of we're all recovering from something, I believe there's a coalescence between all of us that we're all experiencing life and trying to put that back together. So I think on a basis, I think that whether you're a clinician or researcher, government official, law enforcement, whatever, we have a basis of understanding that we all want to see other people do well. We all want to be a part of the solution and a part of the healing process. I think that I love it when I hear the other panel members talk about partnership and mentorship. I wouldn't be doing the work. In our world, the governor's office in Indiana has funded this work for us for the last 5 years. Been a huge advocate, and state leadership across the board. So being in those spaces and working in those spaces, and they're making sure that people with lived experience are at every conversation, at every table, and they're not asking us to be something we're not, ultimately asking us to be just exactly who we are, but to idealize this concept of what does it look like for us to be professionals. I've learned a lot of that from the mentorship of people in the clinical world and researchers and law enforcement. And so understanding that partnership can grow to help create an opportunity for people with lived experience to see themselves as partners in that work and to be able to exist there. And then I think in that step, we begin to realize what that partnership looks like. I think the challenge for me, and I believe in advocacy wholeheartedly. I've learned that I try and get at the table to have conversations. I'm not much of a stand outside and speak against kind of person, but mainly because I spent too many years screaming, and I just don't like to do that anymore. So I try and sit at the table and create conversation that helps create change. But I think that as clinicians and researchers and other folks, you guys have an opportunity to create that space for people. And then to invite them in, create that, be a safe space, ask questions, try and learn. The one thing I would recommend that we look against, most of the time when blending comes and when people overstep, it usually has to do with funding. Almost always has to do with funding. Whether it be grant funding or whether it be there's an OBHP billing option within Medicaid, and so we're going to hire peers and fund them through our clinical agencies. But what we've learned is that peers exist and succeed better when their ecosystem is peer-driven. That means the leadership is done by peers, the supervision is done by peers, and then the work is done by peers. And it can be a coexistence of this system that we want to create in that way. So I would recommend highly to absolutely be mentors. Please invite people to the table. Teach them all the wealth of knowledge you guys have to pass on, but then also respect the fact that peers need to have their own space and have that space defined, and that we need to be able to operate in every level of that space. Doesn't mean we don't need supervision or leadership, doesn't mean we don't need oversight and all those things that are there, but it means that you have an opportunity to create and protect a space that allows that ecosystem to grow. And the stronger that ecosystem is in your community, in your county, in your state, where you are, the healthier your system will be. And we've learned that across the board. The data across the board shows that.
So this next question really kind of stems from my experience. I felt when I was working as a drug and alcohol counselor, a chemical dependency professional, or substance use disorder professional, I felt that a lot of times my role was almost like probation or parole officer junior or light. And I just, it never really, it just didn't sit well with me. And so one thing that I've really kind of always advocated for is it really does seem like the treatment industry in the U.S. has kind of largely created a system that those that need services can't get them or don't want them. How can we make sure that the recovery spaces, and when I say that I mean spaces at the recovery end of the continuum of care, in the United States don't fall victim or become shaped by the same political, financial, and criminal justice forces that helped shape the treatment system in this country? we'll start with you.
Well, like I said earlier, I think it's really important to provide opportunities for individuals to attend those mutual aid meetings. I mentioned it before, the women in my town don't have any programming when it comes to reentry or supports in the jail system. We need peers. We need peers to go into those spaces to help set them up, to prepare them emotionally, mentally for coming home. Transitional living, it's another huge lack of resource in our area. Yeah, where do we go from here? I don't think that I can properly answer that question, at this time. Because like I said, where I'm from, resources are very few, and there are very few opportunities. I think having the peers in that setting, in a safe space, will propel them forward, get them ready to come home.
I think it's, for me, I think it's twofold. One, I think if you're creating an ecosystem, a recovery ecosystem in your state to be a partner, I think that there needs to be an ecosystem or infrastructure that focuses on providing services. And we've done that in a way of what we call our regional recovery hubs. So the whole state has these regional organizations that are peer-driven and peer-led, and that it's an opportunity for a resource for people. So I think that's one. But I think that you also have to create peer organizations that are advocacy, like strictly advocacy organizations, and they need to be comprised of people with lived experience kind of from across the state, and they need to be invited into the legislative space in your state. Like I was just able to, in Indiana, got invited by our state leading mental health agency to come in and participate on Senate Bill 1006 or House Bill 1006 here in Indiana. And so and I've had other people before me that have just stepped into the legislative space and made sure, again, there is a peer ecosystem space there. So it's another thing where I love it with this wonderful lady here in the front said nothing about us without us. And it's continuing to create those spaces legislatively, in state leadership, in local leadership, in local service provision, like across the board. You have to build that infrastructure across the state, and then make sure that you've invited people to be a part of that who represent all the populations that ultimately need to be represented.
So to answer that question, only one word comes to mind, and it's authenticity, right? We have to be authentic. In every space that we show up, like regardless of wherever I'm at, I'm always going to be my authentic self. If I'm in an $800 million board meeting, I'm bringing this person to that meeting. If I'm in a hood, I'm bringing this person to that meeting. And we have to accept people for who they are, and we cannot conform to the systems, because you see it. We see it all the time. We see people, you get that little badge, all of a sudden you get the badge, and now you're starting to talk like a clinician. Not to say that my people, we have many people that are persons in recovery that are clinicians, even on our panel, right? So we're not saying that, but we're saying do not conform to these systems that are already broken. We need to show up as who we are and treat humans as humans. Because everyone says, well, I've never smoked crack, so how do I treat someone? Well, listen, I didn't tell you how to smoke crack to work with somebody. How about treating them as a human being first? How about let's start there, right? Can we start there? Can we just start with treating people as human beings first? And then, and being your authentic self and being honest. Like I never smoked crack, I never carried a gun, but I'm here to be of service to you. How can we help each other in this mutual relationship? See, if you understand the peer language, then you understand how we work together with organizations, systems, and human beings.
Yeah. All right, so before we turn it over to audience questions, this will be the speed round, so if we could get these answers to under a minute. The last question is, if you could make one change to the current prison reentry landscape, what would that be and why? And we'll start down here with you.
Yeah, that's hard. That's not an impossible I think for me, if I had a wish list, if you said, hey, I can have whatever I want, I think that we need to successfully identify an opportunity to see prisons differently than we're currently seeing them. Right now, a prison is a place where someone goes to serve out a sentence of punishment. And I don't care who, I mean, I'm not going to say that secure environments don't need to exist, because they absolutely do. Public safety is important, but I will also say that anyone who looks at the prison systems right now realizes it's not working. It's just not working, right? So we need to reinvent that space into something different. And if we want the cultures inside the jails and the outcomes to be differently, we have to reinvent how we even think about prison. It's got to be something different than what it is. I think that's the core.
Yeah, one thing that I would change, definitely creating more second chance, recovery-friendly workplaces. That's super important, especially for people in recovery from substance use and mental health concerns. We need to start speaking with business leaders and employers and getting them trained in what people in recovery need. We need to attend court, right? We need to go to a mutual aid meeting. We need to meet with our therapist. I don't know of too many recovery-friendly workplaces that are that flexible, but we need to work on that for sure.
Yeah.
Y'all see how Noel looked at me and was like, we're going to keep this short, the speed round? I'm going to automatically say ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, addressing them at school levels, also addressing them if you didn't catch them at school, right? We need to start identifying trauma. One of the things we don't talk enough about is trauma. We need to be talking about trauma, because once we start to talk about trauma and start to address those issues, people stop cycling in and out of the systems. Until we're willing to address the things that have people entering the systems, using substances, I was numbing a pain that I couldn't identify. So, and once I was able to identify that pain, then I was able to address the issues, and then I ended up here in Texas.
Yeah. All right, I think we're ready. If my one thing would be that every time someone is assigned a parole or probation officer, they're also assigned a peer recovery specialist across the country. That's my dream. So I think we're ready to open up to questions.
So sorry. I do believe we have a question online.
Okay, so this is from Jose Flores. In your experience, what have been the challenges that new reentry programs face when providing SED or mental health treatment and recovery support services to people coming out of the criminal justice system? So maybe some of those lessons learned.
I'm here in the room. Can I change up my question?
Yes. Sure.
One moment so they can hear you online.
This is like a question and a comment as well, is because I spent 13 years incarcerated here in Texas, 8 of those years in solitary confinement, and like a huge part of my recovery has been higher education. And so one thing I've seen is that so many times, because I can agree that there's a large population of folks incarcerated that have a history of substance use and mental health challenges that were probably there before they even went in and are exacerbated through that experience, right? But we're so quick to put them in a box and say, oh, they need substance use treatment, right? And then that's part of their individualized treatment plan when they're going through incarceration, and when they get out, it's going to be part of that long list of requirements. But like for someone like me that started higher ed in prison, made parole, nobody was there asking me, Jose, how would you like to continue that higher ed, right? There was no peer support. They were focused on my history of substance use and my substance use related charges, but then they say, hey, Jose, those 8 years that you spent in solitary confinement, how can we better help you with that so you can be successful out here? Do you need someone to walk you to the community college like when your dad dropped you off, right? Luckily, my mother had started higher ed while I was incarcerated, so she knew where to direct me to. My mother did the peer work for me, right? And so that's what I feel is, I wasn't, like I said, this wasn't necessarily a question, just a comment that I feel like we're so quick to box people. I mean, we're at a substance use symposium, right? But I go into the prison system now with higher education programs, and not a lot of the scholars that I work with identify as being in recovery from substance use, right? Or even mental health challenges, man. Yeah. And But I want to help them to continue that higher education while they're incarcerated and when they get out, because I know that can be that stepping stone for them to be successful when they leave, if that makes sense.
No, it 100% makes sense. And what I would say, too, is that it's funny that you say that, because that's the only question that we didn't get to, is what about the people that don't meet criteria for diagnosis of mental health and substance use disorder? You know, what are we doing for those individuals? What kind of reentry services? Because we're quick on you know, substance use and mental health, and, you know, I agree completely. I mean, obviously you're preaching to the choir with the, you know, the higher education. I mean, it is, like you said, it absolutely changed my life. And you're right, there, you know, my parole officer only wanted to know, am I going to pee dirty? You know, all these things that send me back to prison. He wasn't interested at all in the things that were going to help me be successful in my life. And so that's, you know, that's got to change, and I think that's where the peer role really can come in and really kind of make that difference. And so that's why I think that it is so important that a peer is assigned to everyone when a parole or a probation officer is as well. I don't know if any other people want to add to that, but.
And I think it's, I mean, I'm someone who lives with long-term mental illness. I have schizophrenia, right? And usually we separate everything out, like substance use is over here, and then mental health is over here, and then it's like an everything else box, right? And that includes the stuff that help, you know, we're so concerned with substance use because it's such a killer on all of us. It's killing people we love and care about every day, and it is important to address that. But I always hate it when people talk about co-occurring disorders, or they talk about, like, they separate mental health and substance use, because I'm like, it's people being healthy, regardless of what they're living with. And we have to get to the point where we start talking about mental illness and mental health in a much more extensive way, to get to the point where we can accept that it's a spectrum and we can be all over the place in the spectrum, and it's okay to talk about it. And I think we're getting there, but if we can get past pocketing things out, then we'll start including stuff like, okay, you've made all this progress here. Let's not focus on the boxes. Let's figure out what does your whole health look like, and start talking about it. Because that would include, okay, you've done this great work here with your education. Let's continue that moving forward. So we have to, I think it goes back to us siloing the needs, right? Because again, not everybody has every need in every box, but we shouldn't look at it that way. We should look at it in the idea that it's a whole person approach. We need to look at that whole person approach, and then be willing to have the hard conversations and look at them. I think, seriously.
We have a question here in the back.
Hi, I'm Jerry Gilstrand with Dallas Fire. I'm with the overdose response team. My question is, I'm fishing for answers from the panel. You all are very articulate, and you know the system very well. But going back, I have a meeting with our Dallas County and jail system, and they are fishing for ways to help people who've been incarcerated once they get out. Just like you talked about, I don't think just treating them for their SUD is the only way to solve the problem. You got adverse childhood experiences, you got different things that go in with the jail, and so for me, my team will try to follow with those patients that leave the jail system. And so I'm wondering, what could I put together in order to help those people that come out of the jail? I've never been in jail, but I don't know if they get a peer support specialist that comes with them with Dallas County. I know you guys probably aren't from Dallas County, but I don't know any jail that has a peer support program. Would I be, they don't? Okay, I see head shaking like no. So that could be some of the things that I could suggest. And so if a county as large as Dallas start doing things, maybe that will trickle down to other places. So sorry, that's a question that's all over the place, but again, I'm trying to fish for answers.
They said Harris County up front, brother. You need to go to Harris County, sounds like. Just really quickly, they were going to say Harris County. But both things that I would say is the number one question I would say to you is, have you asked the people that are inside, that you're working with, what they need? Right? We need to start there. Ask them, what was it? What was the things? We talk about pebbles and boulders where I'm from, right? The boulders are the things that you can see. The pebbles are the things that trip us up. What led you back here? What are you lacking? You know, a lot of times across the country, we're housing, employment. Those are the number one things. So those are the things that we know that bring people back. So having that conversation, and Brother Jose, I really appreciate your authenticity in the room, brother, because what I would say is that we need to start with person-centered. right? The person-centeredness is asking individuals. Too long, so many people have said or tried to address the issues that are wrong with us instead of asking us what happened to us, right? If you don't ask the right questions, you'll never get the right answer.
We have a question from online.
How can we support the families of loved ones who have loved ones who are incarcerated due to the stigma that they're experiencing? What are some good ways to support them?
My answer is going to be really, really short. There's a website, the Washington families of people that are incarcerated in the state of Washington have a website and or a Facebook page. They do such an awesome job of coordinating around initiatives, around laws that are going to affect their loved ones that are currently incarcerated. That's one solution that it warms my heart every time not much on social media warms my heart, but when I open it up and see all of the work, really, really incredible work that they're doing, the families of loved ones that are incarcerated. I'll share that with whoever would like to find that Facebook page, but it's incredible.
I can truthfully say that I don't know of too many supports in my area that have family support services. I can't truthfully answer that, so pass it along to my colleague over here.
I would just say families are super important, right? Thank God for moms. Shout out to the single moms in the room, as I am a product of a single mom. Whose phone number, thank you, I'll let her know that you guys clap for her, but whose phone number never changed while I was locked up. Her phone number always stayed the same so I could call. But, we do biopsychosocials when people come into systems, right? We ask them all these questions. You never ask the question, who's going to do this bid with you? And can we reach out to them? Because you need to prepare that person for when that individual comes home and they say, I don't eat pork anymore. You say, well, this is why. Or they may be quiet. They're not upset. There's nothing wrong. They may be quiet for this reason. So educating and working with the family in the reentry process is essential. So if it doesn't exist, my friends, create it.
All right. So I first of all want to say thank you. Thank you to Jennifer. Thank you to Lucas. Thank you to Robert Ashford, who I'm not even sure is here, for seeing the value in this panel and really trusting us to come up. And I think that the panel just did an incredible, incredible job. So if we could have a really large round of applause for everyone on the panel, it would be great.